All right, welcome to the first edition of the reading of my book, War and Peace. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this. So tonight I'm going to get through the foreword and some of the acknowledgements, and then the next chapter we'll get into the first chapter of the book. So the next video we'll get into the first chapter of the book. So, all right, it starts off. This book here is the first edition. It's the very, very first edition that came out in 2012. And this is a copy that I gave to my son. And I wrote a note for him back then. And you've also got to keep in mind, this is now, I'm reading this in 2025. Since 2012, a lot has changed for me. A lot of emotions have changed. A lot of my values and ideals have changed about things. The way I think about things has changed. So this book was written from, a different viewpoint to what I have now in a lot of areas. And in a lot of areas, it's exactly still the same. So the book may upset some people. It may make some people angry. It may most people, especially the ones who were there, would probably just listen and have fun, and agree with what I'm saying here, because I tried to keep the book as unpolitical as possible. However, the period was quite heavy politically at the time. So this is what I wrote to my son. My son's name's Sebastian. So to Seb, I'm glad I lived to see you grow into a wonderful young man. This period molded me into who I am. I hope you enjoy it. So basically what I'm trying to say is this is why I'm nuts. So read this book and you'll see why. Okay, cool. And then it says, this is something written by the publisher, the late Peter Stiff, who published the first editions of my book. Very nice man. Was willing to take the chance on this book when he heard the synopsis. He asked me, I contacted him and he said to me, okay, whatever, write me a synopsis, a five-page synopsis. I'll get back to you within 6 weeks. And I wrote this 5-page synopsis of my experience in the townships. And he phoned me the very next morning and he said, is what you wrote here true? And I was like, every word of it. And he was like, come and see me. We need to publish this book. So that's where it all started. I went to go see him. He funnily enough, his offices were in Alberton, which was right next to Tukoza, which was one of the townships that I worked in. And he brought one of the printers that worked for him, and into the office, and he said, so this is this guy's story. Like, was this pretty much what happened back then? And this guy was like, it was actually far worse than that. So it was. This book has been toned down because if I had to have put everything in from all my experiences, it would probably be unreadable for most. Okay, cool. So here we go. This is what he wrote. Nick Howarth came into South Africa from the UK with his parents when he was still a baby. He grew up in Nigel, in what was then the Transvaal. By his own account, he spent much of his childhood in the veld catching wild rabbits and snakes. Although not academically inclined, he was a gifted sportsman, able to pursue any sport and play any game at top level. He excelled at athletics and at one stage was a provincial and national champion for his age group in cross country and the 800 meters. His dream was to compete in the Olympics one day, but at the time, South Africa was excluded from international athletic competition because of apartheid. But he was British born, so anything was possible. He was offered numerous scholarships by universities in the USA, and he enrolled in the Wichita State University. That was the one that I picked. Where he was due to start his new career in January 1986. However, apartheid interfered and the university was persuaded to award my scholarship to a young black student instead. Faced with compulsory national service, he chose the South African police, where he volunteered to become a regular riot squad policeman. Peter Stiff always called it riot squad. It was a riot unit. Riot squad policeman in the East Rand riot unit, where he was soon promoted to sergeant and where he spent 9 years, he is now a successful businessman. So that's what Peter Stoff writes about me. It was very nice. And then here are some acknowledgements that I wanted to make in the beginning of the book, and I'll give a little bit of background to some of them. Yeah, I won't. I'll tell you what, it'll all come out in the book. The background to all of these things will come out in the book. So this book is for my lovely wife, Marina, and all the riot unit wives who stuck it out through every hardship and never grumbled. She worried, she had sleepless nights, she wondered, she cried, and she always loved me. Thank you for being there and getting me through it all. I realized it was harder for you than for me, never knowing whether I would come home in one piece or whether I would come home at all. Remember, there were no cell phones in those days. Like literally the wives would be at home hearing stuff on the radio about policemen being killed on the East Rand or on the Rand in violence and not knowing what to expect. This one is for David Kruger. Sergeant David Kruger was a very good friend of mine who paid the ultimate price and in so doing saved the lives of countless of his comrades. The story will come up in the book. And for Sergeant J.P. van Wyk, who took my place in death. I'm eternally grateful. When I read that chapter, I'll probably get emotional. And finally, it is for all those cops who left their souls and their sanity in the townships across South Africa. They are not forgotten. Yeah, so I can tell you right now, there's going to be times where I go through this book where I'm going to shed a tear. Okay, and I hope you're all okay with that. All right, here's the foreword. 27 January 1986 was the day I jumped into a hole that almost swallowed me permanently. When I look back at myself and see how much I've changed, I can hardly believe that what I'm about to tell you actually happened. What's worse is that it actually happened to me. Now it seems unreal, like one of those bad dreams that you wake up from feeling really depressed. I had entered a violent and brutal world, a world that normal people do not see, even in nightmares. In fact, when I started writing this book, my old riot unit mates told me that I should be prepared to take the flak because my story is too unlikely. But here it is anyway. I grew up in a small town called Nigel. Nigel is a small mining town on the East Rand of what was then the Transvaal. I spent most of my childhood in the veld catching wild rabbits and snakes. Nigel was a fantastic place to grow up. In. My parents had emigrated from England in May 1969. That was when I was a year old. When I was just over a year old. Ours was a good home where I was given most of what I needed and a good deal of what I wanted. We took 3 holidays a year to the coast and always had a big Christmas. My dad was a mechanical engineer who worked his way up the corporate ladder the hard way and ended up at the top of the rung. He was a true professional who believed in doing things properly and the first time round with lots of hard work. My mother was not only a homemaker but also had a full-time employment. I am the youngest of 3 siblings. My sister, Joanne, who is 4 years older than me, was also a good scholar and good sportswoman. She was a prefect at school and well liked by all the teachers. My brother Craig, 6 years older than me, also did well in the classroom and on the sports field. But his main talent lay in his artistic ability. He was truly one of the best artists I have ever seen. He joined the South African Air Force and was selected for pilot training. Unfortunately, he was involved in a serious motorcycle accident and lost the ability to perceive depth. He banged his head quite hard. This counted him out of the pilot course training. So he was halfway through the training and then had to get washed off the course. It was the worst day of his life. I felt really sorry for him. Ever since he was a kid, he'd be looking up in the sky at aeroplanes flying overhead as we looked very close to the Donata Air Force Base. That's all that interested him. His bedroom was filled with model aeroplanes. On the bookshelves and cupboards and hanging by cotton from the ceiling. He absolutely loved aircraft and flying. On the other hand, I was a terrible scholar and had no interest in schoolwork. In fact, my energy went into how I could not do it. Unsurprisingly, the teachers didn't like me much, but that didn't bother me. I discovered quite early in my life that I was a gifted sportsman, able to play just about any game at top level. Give me a bat, a racket, a club, a ball, and I know what to do with it. As a result, I had a lot of fun growing up and was a peace-loving, happy kid. I really started to do well as a runner when I started high school and decided to make that my number one sport. I excelled to the point where I was provincial and national champion for my age group in the cross country in the 800 meters. I was unbeatable and I dreamt of competing in the Olympics one day. At the time, South Africa was excluded from international athletic competition because of apartheid. But I was British, so everything was possible. I received numerous offers from scholarships in the United States, which you've already been over. And then I ended up not going because they sent a little black guy in my place who ended up being too old anyway. And it was a whole hoo-ha about that. In any case, I decided that I wasn't going to buck my responsibility to the country I grew up in. At the end of my final year in 1985, I was posted to the 7th Infantry Corps. But I decided to volunteer for the South African Police instead, which was allowed. It seemed to me at the time that the police force was more willing to support promising athletes. Boy, was I wrong. This, then, is the true story of my 9 years in the South African Police, most of which I was a sergeant in the East Rand Riot Unit, or Riot Unit number 6, based in Donata. Donata was surrounded by 17 black townships, the main ones being Katlehong, Thokoza, Vosloorus, Tembisa, KwaThema, and Davidton. The first 3 of these were jointly better known as Katuris. Rated by the United Nations in 1990 as one of the most dangerous places to be in the world. At any rate, this is what we were told, and it was quite easy to believe that. Thousands of South Africans were brutally killed in the violence that ravaged the black townships in the years leading up to the landmark 1994 democratic elections. Because information was carefully controlled by the government, 90% of South African whites were unaware that an all-out tribal war was raging on their doorstep as they snuggled up in their safe suburban homes. Nevertheless, they felt justified in criticizing and castigating the police riot units for their heavy-handed intervention between the warring factions. This story is not meant to stir your emotions unduly or change your political outlook. It is meant to open your eyes to what was really going on in South Africa in the transition period leading up to the most important elections the country has ever held. It is a tribute to all the riot cops who worked the townships in the late 80s and early 90s. The elections could have gone horribly wrong without us, and that's the truth.